Hey, you ever just pause and try to remember what it felt like before you could ask your phone literally anything or get instant directions anywhere? It's almost like there was this whole other reality before that pocket supercomputer became, well, just a given.
It really does feel like a different era, doesn't it? And that same sense of a fundamental shift, a before and after moment in how we interact with technology is exactly what we're going to explore today.
Precisely. Because there's a real buzz building around extended reality XR, which includes things like virtual reality and augmented reality. And a lot of smart folks in the industry are predicting that 2025 is going to be its smartphone moment.
Yeah, and we've got some interesting material to dig into to understand why. We'll be looking at the arguments laid out in Beyond the Hype, Why 2025 is XR's Smartphone Moment, an XR industry outlook.
Right.
So think of this as your insider's look at why this particular year is generating so much anticipation in the XR space.
So our mission today is pretty clear, to figure out why this comparison to the smartphone revolution is being made. What are the key similarities between where XR is right now and where mobile tech was just before it, well, exploded into the mainstream? And crucially, what could this all mean for you and how you might interact with technology in the near future?
Okay, so this whole idea rests on this parallel with 2007 and the launch of the iPhone. Can you maybe paint a picture for us of what smartphones were actually like back then? Because for some of us, it might feel like ancient history.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh.
Yeah, rewind to the pre-iPhone days, and you had devices from companies like Nokia, BlackBerry, Palm. You remember those?
Oh, yeah, the BlackBerry keyboard?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're definitely capable. You could get your email, do some basic web browsing, manage your calendar. They served a specific need, mostly for like professionals who needed to stay connected on the go. Right? They were functional tools, but they weren't exactly these life-changing devices that everyone had to have. I vaguely remember my old phone struggling to even load simple web pages. Definitely not something you'd use for streaming or gaming.
No way. And then, boom, the iPhone shows up.
Yeah.
And that's the crux of it. The iPhone wasn't just a slightly better phone. It fundamentally changed the game. That intuitive multi-touch screen and the introduction of a real ecosystem of apps, it wasn't just about making calls anymore.
Right. It was about everything else you could suddenly do.
It unlocked a whole universe of possibilities, and that's what fueled that massive growth across the entire smartphone industry, not just for Apple.
Okay, so how does our source material connect that pivotal moment to where XR is sitting today?
Well, the source draws a direct line, suggesting that modern VR and the wider XR field really had their genesis, let's say, with the launch of Oculus. That sparked the initial wave of excitement, that promise of deeply immersive digital experiences in areas like gaming, training simulations, and even connecting with others in virtual social spaces.
I definitely remember that initial buzz around VR. It felt like the future had arrived. But it's probably fair to say it hasn't quite permeated our daily lives in the same way smartphones have. Not yet, anyway.
Not yet, no.
The source even uses the term slower burn for XR. What do you think were the main reasons for that more gradual adoption?
Well, several factors played a role in that slower initial uptake. For one, the early XR hardware had some significant limitations. I mean, the headsets were often quite bulky, pretty cumbersome.
Yeah, not exactly something you'd want strapped to your face all day.
Right. And many needed to be physically tethered to powerful computers, and those computers themselves were a significant investment for the average consumer. It wasn't cheap.
Yeah, I can imagine. Being physically connected to a machine kind of defeats the purpose of this immersive, freeing experience, right? Doesn't exactly scream everyday convenience.
Exactly. And the source emphasizes how crucial the advancements in lighter, more energy-efficient XR chips and higher resolution, more compact displays are. These are the key to creating that comfortable, seamless, and truly believable immersive experience that people will actually want to use regularly.
Makes sense. And what about how we actually interact with these virtual or mixed realities? The source touches on this challenge of input.
That's another critical piece, yeah.
Ah.
While technologies like hand tracking have made impressive strides, performing really intricate tasks, even something as fundamental as typing, can still feel a bit clunky and, well, unnatural for many users in VR.
Right. Like waving your hands around is cool for some things, but maybe not for writing a long email.
Precisely. That friction in how we interact can be a real barrier to using XR for longer periods and for a broader range of tasks,
Okay, so the early gear had some hurdles. Interacting wasn't always smooth. But the source argues that we're seeing a shift, that the tides are turning, and 2025 is poised to be different. What's the big change we're looking at?
The core argument is that we're now witnessing a really significant confluence of advancements across several vital areas. These advancements, when you look at them together, strongly suggest that XR is indeed on the verge of its own smartphone moment.
Okay.
And the trajectory we're seeing for 2025 has some striking echoes of what happened with mobile around, well, 2007.
All right, let's break down these key advancements. The first one, the source highlights, is AI-powered computing within XR. How is artificial intelligence stepping up to change the game here?
So, what's truly transformative here is how AI is moving beyond just enhancing the visuals or the audio. It's becoming deeply integrated into the very functionality. AI is enabling much more efficient processing within the headsets themselves.
So less reliance on a tethered PC.
Potentially, yes, or just making untethered experiences much more powerful. It's also allowing for a smarter understanding of the context, the system being able to interpret what you're looking at, what you're trying to achieve.
Okay, knows what you want to do.
Sort of, yeah. And it's paving the way for far more natural and intuitive interactions within these virtual and mixed realities.
So it's not just about making virtual worlds look more realistic. It's about making them behave more intelligently and respond more naturally to us.
Precisely. This leap in computational power, driven by AI, is what's making truly untethered, genuinely powerful, and highly intuitive AI-enhanced XR devices a real possibility. And that's really the bedrock for the growth of what's being called spatial computing.
Spatial computing.
This idea of interacting with digital information in a three-dimensional space that surrounds you, think of it less like looking at a screen and more like manipulating digital objects right there in your own environment.
That sounds like a fundamental shift in how we engage with technology. What's the next critical piece of this puzzle? The source mentions a form factor and input revolution.
Exactly. So on the form factor side, we're seeing a clear and consistent trend towards VR and MR headsets becoming significantly sleeker, lighter, and much more comfortable to wear for extended periods. That's crucial.
Definitely helps with adoption.
But just as important is the progress in how we actually interact with these devices. And this is where the increasing maturity of conversational AI for XR is potentially a real game changer.
Conversational AI, like the voice assistants we're already familiar with on our phones and speakers.
Pretty much, yeah. But ideally much more sophisticated and context-aware within XR. The idea is that voice input in VR and AR could evolve into a primary, natural, and incredibly efficient way to get things done.
Interesting.
Imagine navigating complex virtual environments, or even drafting documents simply by speaking. This could dramatically lower the barrier to entry for many users who might find traditional controllers or even hand tracking less intuitive for certain tasks.
Yes, it makes the technology far more approachable, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
If I can just talk to my XR device to navigate or create, it feels much more seamless and less like I need to learn a whole new language of buttons and gestures.
It's about the technology adapting to our natural way of communicating, rather than us having to constantly adapt to it. Now, the source also puts a strong emphasis on the role of major players in the industry. These technological advancements aren't happening in a vacuum, right?
Definitely not. It seems like the big tech companies are making some pretty significant moves in this space. The article specifically mentions Apple and their Vision Pro, for instance.
And what's so significant about Apple's entry is the level of validation it brings to the entire XR market. I mean, when a company of that scale throws its hat in the ring, it sends a clear signal that they see a major future in spatial computing.
Focuses attention, brings investment.
Exactly. And then there's the collaboration we're seeing between Samsung and Google on the Android XR operating system. That sounds like a potentially huge development.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
It really is potentially huge. If we step back and look at the bigger picture, this mirrors the strategy that ultimately led to Android's widespread dominance in the smartphone market, creating an open ecosystem.
Right, letting lots of different companies build hardware.
Exactly. An open ecosystem encourages innovation and a wider variety of devices at different price points. And Google's recent announcements at their I/O event just further highlight their serious commitment to this platform.
So we could potentially see a similar dynamic unfold in the XR world. Different manufacturers building devices powered by a common underlying operating system.
That's the potential. It fosters a more competitive landscape, which, often drives innovation faster and can lead to broader adoption as more affordable and diverse options become available.
Makes sense.
And the source also makes sure to acknowledge the ongoing and significant efforts of companies like Meta with their MetaQuest line and HTC with their Vive systems, they've been pioneers in this space for years, really laying the foundational groundwork.
Right, they're the veterans, as the source kind of implies. They've been consistently pushing the boundaries of both hardware and investing heavily in the whole metaverse concept, putting in the research.
Exactly. Their continued innovation and the vast amount of software and experiences they've developed provide a really strong base for this next wave of XR adoption. Now, there's also a lot of anticipation building around future hardware releases, particularly from Apple.
Yeah, the source touches on the next iteration of the Apple Vision Pro.
Yeah.
Why is there so much focus on these second-generation devices? What's the thinking there?
Well, if we look back at the history of technology, second-generation products often take that initial groundbreaking vision and refine it. They address some of the limitations or maybe the high costs of that first version.
Oh, okay.
The source actually uses the examples of the Apple II computer and the iPhone 3G. While the original iPhone was revolutionary, it was the 3G version, with the App Store really taking off and faster data speeds, that truly opened the floodgates for mass consumer adoption.
Right, it became more practical, more useful for more people.
Precisely. So the expectation is that a more accessible, perhaps more powerful or feature-rich successor to the Vision Pro, which might be on the horizon maybe later this year or next, that could act as another major catalyst for the entire AR/VR market.
Okay, so potentially bringing spatial computing to a much wider audience and further solidifying XR's path towards becoming a mainstream technology.
That's exactly the anticipation. It has that potential. So pulling all of this together, why does the source specifically point to 2025 as this potential inflection point for XR? What makes that year special?
It sounds like it's the perfect storm, kind of all these different elements coming together, hardware that's becoming sleeker, more comfortable for everyday use, AI-powered experiences that are becoming more intuitive and less clunky, voice control evolving into a truly viable primary way to interact,
Yeah.
and major industry players like Apple, Google, and Samsung making significant moves to build out the ecosystem. It all seems to be converging.
You've nailed it. Just like back in 2007 when the iPhone really showcased the true potential of a smartphone for a broad consumer base, 2025 is shaping up to be the year where this convergence of advancements will really demonstrate XR's potential.
To become an indispensable tool.
Yeah, an indispensable tool for a wide spectrum of activities from how we work and learn to how we communicate and are entertained, moving it properly into the mainstream.
So it's not just about the hype anymore. It's about these fundamental technological breakthroughs, the creation of a robust and competitive ecosystem, compelling and practical use cases starting to emerge.
Right.
And ultimately, a critical mass of users beginning to adopt the technology in meaningful ways.
Exactly. The source makes a good point about how some focus on the superficial buzz, while others are quietly building the foundations for a real transformation. The argument here is that those foundations have been laid, and 2025 could be the year we see XR truly step into its smartphone moment, with a focus on that significant long-term shift, not just short-term excitement.
Okay, this has been a really insightful deep dive into why 2025 is being talked about as such a pivotal year for XR. We've explored the compelling parallels with the smartphone revolution, the reasons behind the initial slower adoption of XR, and the key technological leaps that are fueling this renewed optimism.
And we've seen how the alignment of more user-friendly hardware, the intelligence of AI, the naturalness of voice control, and the strategic moves of major industry players are creating this, well, fertile environment for XR to move beyond niche applications and become a more integrated part of our everyday lives.
So for you, the listener, really think about this. With these advancements potentially just around the corner, what aspects of your daily routine do you envision being fundamentally reshaped by more seamless and intuitive XR technology? Looking beyond just gaming or entertainment, what completely new possibilities might emerge that we can't even fully grasp yet? Definitely a fascinating landscape to watch as we move closer to 2025.